Well, hello there. Hello, Chewy.
Oh, saucy greeting.
Saucy greeting. How are you, man?
Good, mate. Good.
Welcome to BHN, also known as Big Hairy News. For people who don't know what we do, who haven't seen us before, welcome. No matter what vein of the community you're from, welcome. Good to have you on board. Big Hairy News is a daily live stream news conversation. And whilst both Chewy and myself are particularly hairy people, we think about the big hairy part to being a bit like the big hairy audacious goal. It's the big hairy audacious news story. So that's what we're doing. Before we get into this, a little bit of housework. We also have a daily news, a daily audio podcast, which is now scrolling along the bottom. The daily audio podcast you can get on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts and Spotify. All you need to do is search for hashtag BHN or Big Hairy News. The show we do every single night at 10 p.m, we then just rip the audio off it, and that becomes the daily audio podcast. You can actually subscribe to one of our audio channels, and then of course the audio podcast will be straight into your device. Listen to it on the way to work tomorrow. If you miss anything, I'm sure no one ever misses anything, Joey. I'm sure they're always here on board fully. Also this week, for the very first time, we are like a three-man show, a one-man show with two other men on the side, so to speak. So we're kind of bootstrapping this and doing it slowly but surely, adding little things every week. What we added this week, and you'll see it along the bottom of the page if you're not listening to the audio, is we just started our Facebook page this week for the first time. So head along to facebook.com/Big Hairy News, and you will get to subscribe to our content. We live stream on Facebook, we live stream on YouTube, we live stream on my Twitter feed, we live stream on Twitch, and that's probably it. I don't know. And then, of course, everything's on demand afterwards, and we cut up clips and turn them into segments of the show that you can watch as well. So that's kind of what we're all about. The big hairy news stories of the day. Like, subscribe, and comment. Now, Chewy, there has been quite a lot going on today behind the scenes. Okay? Friend of the show.
You rang me all aflutter.
Well, I don't know if I'd say a flutter. Because I've got a show that's pretty full tonight, and I went, George has got the night off. Chewy could take the night off. I've already kind of got a interview in the bag, but then I went, and then Chewy might be into this. Chewy might be into this conversation. So we have I'm happy to say, friend of the show, Dr. Suze Wilson. She's been on before talking about various leadership roles. She's a doctor, and she works in the School of, say leadership, that might be the wrong word. Anyway, and she, for Massey University, and she's been on before talking about things, and she sent me a message actually yesterday about her new article. And I'll actually just bring up her article to start this conversation off, shall I? And it was an article which, surprisingly, Chewy, we've talked about a little bit on the show already. Obviously not to the extent and to the academic rigor that Dr. Wilson has, but Luxons Dilemma, when politics and morals don't match, in response to the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And we've had this conversation, I'm sure you and I have had it this week, and I know me and George have had it this week, about when you have a personal ideology that considers abortion to be murder, then perhaps you're at a bit of your character wants to stop it because you consider it murder. And if something is murder, all of us want to stop murder. So if you consider this action to be murder, then your innate belief is you want that to be stopped. But then you also have to be expedient in your beliefs or in your political policy. You have to understand that maybe the majority of New Zealand don't agree with you. So you say things like no changes will be made to the abortion laws. Now that's the dilemma. And I think that is completely reasonable to say that's the dilemma. It's a little bit like, we talked a bit about if Jacinda Ardern introduces a capital gains tax, because she has said, when I'm Prime Minister, there'll be no capital gains tax. Now, she's got a dilemma at the moment, which is actually maybe a capital gains tax would be good for the tax coffers, but I've promised not to have one. So she's actually got a dilemma. James Shaw had a dilemma the other day when they challenged him on those people going around Auckland popping SUV tyres with knives. And he said, he got asked by a journalist, do you reject that concept? And he had a dilemma because he couldn't distance himself necessarily from his voters, and they're likely to be Green voters, but he also couldn't be seen to, endorse what is basically criminal activity. So this thing about Luxon's dilemma, the idea of a politician having a dilemma based on their personal ideology, based on their political policy, also based on the votes that they want. I mean, we had a conversation the other day about Luxon's racist voters. Now, clearly, not suggesting that everyone who votes for Luxon is a racist, but if you're a white supremacist, chances are you sit yourself on the right side of politics. So you're probably either voting National or ACT. Say it again when this conversation gets clipped on the platform on Monday morning. Say it again. Not everyone who votes for National or ACT is a white supremacist. But if you are a white supremacist, that's probably where your votes go. Now, Luxon has a dilemma. And his dilemma is, I want the votes of this group of people. I can't be seen to be endorsing their views. How do I placate them to keep their views, but also say to the rest of the country, I abhor this? So look, that's not a criticism. That's reality. All politicians have dilemmas. Luxon's dilemma at the moment is he has a very important personal belief to him based on his religion that abortion is murder. And his dilemma is, what do I do publicly when I have this personal belief? So the heading Luxon's dilemma, I don't see a problem with, right? No. But apparently there has been a bit of a problem with it.
I mean,
now you go, yeah.
There's two aspects here that I'll chip in on here. Is A, letting himself get cornered into a position of saying, do you agree that abortion is murder, yes or no, is utter political inexperience.
Yeah, well, that was his kind of leadership.
If he had softened that at any point, he could have personally gone, I personally don't approve. But, it gives him room to move politically. And the other part is exactly what you're saying. At some point, he's balancing, or at least appearing to balance, a deeply, deeply held personal religious position with the pragmatism of, I want to be the leader of the country. I can't piss off too many people.
Yep.
On either side, he's either pissing off the really rabid, let's say, anti-abortionists.
Yep.
And he's also balancing middle New Zealand, which is kind of like, well, women should be able to do what they want with their bodies for a medical procedure.
Yeah.
And he's failed at that. That's the dilemma. He's politically inexperienced.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. He's failed at that. And look, I think the point that we're making, the point that I'm making, and I think we agree with, is that we're going to play an interview shortly that, so anyway, what I was saying is Suze Wilson emailed me, told me about this new article. Between her emailing or messaging me on Twitter and me contacting her back today, she went on the platform and had what can only be described as an ambush interview, and I'll put interview in speech marks, by Sean Plunket, an ambush tirade by Sean Plunket. And one of the issues that we'll look at is the idea that he thinks that calling it a dilemma is a bad thing. It's like they all have dilemmas. I mean, if something happened in New Zealand with a far left group, with Antifa or something, that they caused destruction, they did a protest and there was violence and stuff, probably the Greens, but certainly people on the left would have a dilemma of how to keep those votes on board, yet distance themselves from the actions. It's not such a strange situation that the outpouring of this afterwards has been quite peculiar, and it raises several questions in my mind. Hey, before we get going, Katie must be watching us from the UK, because Katie sent us a super chat for £5. So thank you for your super chat, Katie. The super chat is open. You're more than welcome to use it. I happily take your super chats, and also happy to take your comments, which we may or may not use as the show goes on. So I spoke to Suze this afternoon, and that's a pre-recorded conversation, and that's going to be coming up when me and Chuya finish talking, and we talk about the article, which I think is the most important thing to talk about. But we also go over and talk a bit about what happened on the platform this morning with Sean Plunket, because it was abysmal. It was, I mean, you've heard it, Chewy, and the first thing you said to me when you came on before we started was, and it made me mad. Yeah. And it's because of how it was conducted, how Sean Plunket spoke to her, the way he was dismissive, reeks of misogyny to me, but it also just reeks of sort of looking down your nose at someone. And I'm going to say this now, I'll probably say this several times during the hour. The position that Sean Plunket takes is, he tries to question her academic rigor. He tries to question her experience. He tries to question why she's saying this. He tries to challenge her on being her bias. In other words, what he's saying is, why do you think you're qualified to comment on this?
Oh,
right?
But just asking questions.
No,
right?
but not even that. And I'll say this about me. I'll put my hand up. If the criteria for having the perfect qualifications to talk about something publicly is you have to be a part of that world, then Sean Plunket can never fucking talk again. Because him, me, you, Chewy, we're not qualified in 99% of the areas that we talk about. But we hold a position and we hold an opinion. So to have someone who doesn't have any credibility in an area to speak with expertise on an area, I mean, you might say he's got credibility to talk about journalism, broadcasting, those things he's been involved with, fine. Anything outside of that, he doesn't have the same experience as what he's expecting his guest to have, or else their point of view is not valid. So it's hypocrisy in the greatest sense as well.
Oh, it's bizarre. It's hypocrisy in the extreme. It's just an utter failure of journalistic broadcasting standards. And in the second piece, which I'm sure we'll cover, he goes, "Oh, the Broadcasting Standards Authority doesn't apply to me." He knows that.
Yeah.
It's just infuriating.
I mean, it's actually, to be honest, to be fair, that's one of the reasons I love doing this, because we can use whatever language we want and say whatever we want. We don't have a business mummy or daddy investor that doesn't want sweary words on our broadcasts. So we don't have actually, you know what, Chewy? We actually do what the platform claims to do.
Yes.
We don't have any restrictions on what we talk about. We don't stop anything from going on air. Literally nothing. We will talk about anything to anyone if we choose to. Now, what people are going to say is, well, why didn't you have Sean Plunket on? Well, I'm not having Sean Plunket on tonight, even though he kind of begged me on Twitter to come on, because I don't want to talk to him. There's nothing for me to talk to him about. I want to talk to the academic about her piece, and I want to talk to her about how her interview went on Sean Plunket. There's nothing for me to talk to Sean Plunket about. So he's not coming on. However, as we transition into the first thing, I have spoken with Sean Plunket recently. What date was it? The end of May. So that's 5-6 weeks ago.
Yeah,
I spent an hour with Sean Plunket doing a podcast. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to first talk about Sean Plunket and the platform and what they are. We're then going to have a look through the interview that Sean Plunket did with Suze today. We're then going to play the interview that I did with Suze. Hope you guys stick around for this, because we don't often do one topic all night, but after I spoke to Suze and we kind of talked for 30 or 40 minutes, I was just like, let's just nut this out and get this out there. If you are watching right now because you're a fan of Sean Plunket and you're one of those people who have been sending texts today talking about, oh, don't show your bias, Pat. So, well, fuck you. If I want to show my bias, I'll show my bias, but I'm okay with that. I'm a left voter I've been a central left voter. I'm a left voter and I voted for everybody, and I have bias.
There is nothing wrong with having bias.
No.
It's when you say that you don't have a bias, but you do. That's what I have a problem with.
Or you say you're free speech, you ban people who swear on your broadcast. Or you say you're free speech, and when you listen to the interview we're going to do, you say you're free speech and you don't let somebody talk in an ambush interview. You know, so look, what we do here is have 20, 25, 30, tonight's a 40-minute conversation. And typically what we do is we ask a person a question and then we shut the fuck up and they answer. And then we ask them another question. And then we go, hang on, let's challenge this person because that doesn't make sense. So we do that. What we don't do is go, start talking, Chewy.
Oh, well,
hang on. Hang on. Wait.
Just get it.
No. Let me say this first. It's about me.
Oh, right. Okay.
We don't do that because we actually have conversations. Our platform allows conversations. Our platform has actual free speech. Anyone's welcome for the right reason at the right time. We'll have anybody on, and pseudo platforms that claim these things. I've been putting out a tweet today 3 or 4 times. I think it's annoyed a few people. Free speech is to the platform like Fair and Balanced is to Fox News. It's exactly the same because they claim it, but they don't do it. Right. So let's talk about Sean Plunket, and let's talk about what he's all about and what his platform is all about. So, for example, Sean Plunket has this thing at the moment to use the word woke, right? Oh, woke, this is woke, and that's woke, and the other thing is woke, and it's all woke, wokey, woke. For most of us understand that, people who used to say everything was PC now say everything is woke. And when they used to say it was PC, I used to say when I was doing talkback, normally someone who says something is PC doesn't actually understand what PC means. I think the same could be said about woke. So here's a little bit of a conversation from the podcast I did with Sean Plunket 5-6 weeks ago about what it means to be woke in Mr. Plunket's eyes.
Okay, when I say woke, it is someone who engages in identitarian politics.
Yeah.
Who is intolerant of...
Sorry, the very first point, identitarian politics. Just remember that point when we listened to the interview. Just chill.
Of anyone who does not share the same soft left liberal views that they do, who is likely to scream racist. They're more likely to be white than Māori.
So they're allowed, if they scream racist, they could be woke, but if they scream socialist, that's fine. If they scream some other kind of ist, that's fine, but they have to be screaming racist.
They are likely to scream racist or offence on behalf of other people, on behalf of the poor, or peoples of different ethnicity. They will always take offence on someone else's behalf, on someone else's behalf. They are most likely from a comfortable middle-class background. They've had a good education. Their parents are earning good money, and they in their lives will probably never financially face any challenge whatsoever. And it gives them the luxury of being right all the time and despising people who gather on Parliament's lawn, confused to have a protest.
So I got a bit confused when Sean first said that, I'll be honest. You can go and watch the whole clips if you want in your own time. And I thought what Sean was starting to say to start with is that you have to be all of these things to be woke. So I responded to him, which is that's basically no one. No one ticks all those categories. So what are you talking about? I think what he then got into was a conversation where he basically said any one of those areas, if you are, means you could be woke. He went on to talk about how Christopher Luxon is a little bit woke.
Bit woke, you see. So there's a graduation there. It's not black and white.
Sure.
He rejects some of the positions that Seymour takes. So Seymour is pushing him hard on issues like co-governance. Would seem to me that Luxon doesn't really want to engage in that debate.
So is Seymour the example that we want? Is Seymour the anti-woke example that you would hold up if you were writing a dictionary?
No, not particularly. But he occupies a part of the political spectrum, and he seems prepared. Though, look, he can be... I know that he is a guy who thinks quite hard politically and sometimes doesn't say what he thinks or moderates what he thinks for electoral purposes. I mean, he's a politician, so of course he's going to lie. I think he's trying to drag Luxon or guilt Luxon into not being hard line on things, but being more definitive about some of the cultural issues, if you like, abroad. And there's no doubt there's a culture war on, not just in New Zealand, but all over the world. And it's being fought largely through media or social
give me an example of someone who's not woke then. Because it seems to me that, I'm not saying you've said this, that if you wanted to, you could find an
I don't think Michael Laws is woke. Michael Laws certainly isn't woke. Who else isn't woke? I don't think I'm particularly woke. I don't think Mike Hoskins is woke. I don't think Simon, if we talk about many people, I don't think Simon Dallow is woke.
Well, Simon Dallow's nothing. He's neither, because he don't. I don't mean nothing in a bad way. I love Simon. I've worked with him, but he doesn't have opinions.
He's a perfect newsreader. He's neutral.
Yeah. So when challenged with the question who's not woke, you can see that pretty much lots of middle-aged white men of privilege who are in broadcasting are the names that come to mind. They're the not woke people. I think we go on. I'm looking at my notes here. We go on to a little bit more about who is not woke. What's this clip about?
Who else isn't woke? I think there aren't many woke people in the National Caucus. There aren't many woke people in my office or on my broadcast team. But, okay, look, it is a term that I do not tend to apply unless there is a specific story to anyone specific. But I like it as a term because we're talking about it and we're engaged and we're talking about the culture war. So in some ways it is a means to an end. But I'm okay with the word woke because Barack Obama is happy to use it. And Barack Obama has used it in the context of people who sit there active on social media or who virtue signal. That's the other part of wokeness, and go around saying, look at what I've done. Look at how cool and with it I am. Look at how tolerant I am. Look at how diverse I am.
I then went into the part of the conversation there where, because his justification for using woke was, I'm okay to use it because someone else does. So I asked him how often he used the N-word, because, you know, other people use that word, and I'm sure, you know, some profile important people, to which he obviously said he doesn't use that. So then he started to talk about how he self-moderates himself, which I thought sounded very woke to me, to self-moderate yourself and not use, not use various language. We wrap up this little clip of the show I did with him with a very important point. Honestly, who is woke, and how does Sean Plunket, what's the metric that Sean Plunket uses for what is woke? Now that we've expanded this conversation around woke, I feel like probably, as per your definition, 99% of the community is woke now compared to the other, because they probably think it feels a little bit like what you're saying is, if you disagree,
it's a movable feast. It's a movable feast.
If you disagree with my perspective, exactly,
you're woke.
Then you're somewhat
actually
woke.
That's probably the best definition we can come up with, Pat. If I disagree with you, you're woke. I like that.
Some fucking truth out of the man.
Yeah, but
Finally.
but that's actually you know, Shakespeare said it. Often jesters oft prove prophets, or we sometimes say many a truth be told in jest. And I absolutely believe that to be the case. If you disagree with me, you're woke. In other words, if you disagree with me, I'm going to put a label on you that I don't really understand or really know what it means, because I've got a classification that can put everyone in that box, and it means this is who you are, because I'm always right and you're wrong.
It's always these same guys with the same thing. I want to say whatever I want, and I don't want anyone to tell me I'm wrong or make me feel bad about what I've said. You know, I've done things the same way. I don't want to review. I don't want to self-improve. I just want to spout bile and just carry on with my life. Yeah. You know, the things that this man has said over the years. Like, my favorite is, what was it, 2018? I think he said New Zealand rugby would be ruined by feminazis. You like that one.
Perfect.
So,
look, the other
rugby
thing
still
is,
happening?
Well, the other thing, that the hypocrisy of the whole thing is, you know, he rallies against, and I'm going to play a clip now about money, but he rallies against things like people, like people who are working and getting paid by the government. The only reason anyone knows Sean Plunket's name is because of him being on the public tit at Fair Go and then RNZ. So the reason that he has any profile, I'm not saying that he didn't deserve those jobs. I'm not saying he's not a good broadcaster, but the only reason we know of his work is because he was a government employee for TVNZ, and he was a government employee at RNZ. And now he's saying if anyone's on the public ticket, it means that they're not worth listening to. They're terrible people. It's just not. It's not okay. It doesn't work. Whereas the only reason he's been able to get the profile to then bail up some business people to then give him money to support him for 2 years, him and his team, is because of the profile that he has generated whilst being on the public ticket. So there's so much hypocrisy there. It's just palpable.
But he's in the resistance, don't you know?
Yeah, real resistance. Hey, let's have a look at the next clip. This is from a different part of the conversation, and this is me talking to him about free speech. And speaking of free speech, before we do that, I'm having a look at a few comments that are coming in. Caitlin says Plunket blocked me from the platform pages. Lady Power says, isn't that a badge of homage? Honor, sorry, I guess so. Ha ha ha. But so much for free speech. And then this person, well, he's all for his free speech. And then there's someone called Mike Bennett in here. I don't know what Mike Bennett's doing in here. Because,
who's that guy?
I don't know. Says me too. And I thought to talk about free speech is an important thing, because he screams from the rooftop free speech. But in case people aren't aware, there are restrictions on his platform and what he will allow on air. There are restrictions. Now, I worked in radio, Chewy worked in radio. We actually know there's restrictions in radio because there's a broadcasting standards. I don't actually have a problem with restrictions, but when they scream from the rooftops, we have free speech, and then they hinder free speech with restrictions, it means they're not free speech, So it's a little bit like, what was that word he just used? It's just popped out of my head. when people are virtual signaling. It is virtual signaling. We're this, we're free speech,
Massively.
we're free for anybody, and then they don't allow language on that their business partners, that their business mummy and daddy don't like. Because that's why it is. His business partners don't want swearing. The money bags, the Scrooge McDucks don't want swearing. So swearing's not on. And if you swear, they'll ask you to stop. And if you swear again, in fact, before you have a think about that shit, we'll just play it. And if you swear again, they'll ban you. Company X. Company X are the business partners we're talking about.
No, they're people X and they've invested, yeah.
Haven't got a bottom line that if you went there, they'd have a problem. How do I know that as a potential listener?
Okay, there is a bottom line. I'm going to reveal it to you today.
What's that?
They really don't like swearing.
Yeah, well, there you go. I was going to ask that. If I get up and go, how the fuck are you guys on your broadcast, which is free speech?
I'd rather you didn't say that.
And I was like, I can fuck it. This is fucking free speech. I can fucking you say fucking if I
want.
want.
Okay, you can, and you can be free to do that, but we wouldn't have you back on the platform.
Hang on. That's what's weird is. I think that's enough. I have more to play, but I think that's about it. So. Look, and I do you know, let me be clear. I don't actually have a problem with people having rules on there. You know, that podcast that you're seeing clips of, the Department of Conversation, that plays on Stuff. And Stuff have asked me not to use the word cunt. Or they said, if you do use the word cunt, I want you to bleep it. So that's their rules. And I'm like, cool, I don't have a problem with it. But when someone says we are free speech, right? They virtue signal, which is a very woke thing to do. And then they have restrictions on it. Even if it's a little tiny tidbit of a one, then it's not free speech. If I was on the platform, right, which I don't imagine I'll ever be, but if I was on the platform, the first thing I'd say was, oh, Sean, I'm feeling fucking awesome. How are you? Just to see how they'd react. And then I'd go, oh, but you know, it's just been such a fucking good day. Did you see that fucking sunset tonight? Oh, it's fucking amazing. And eventually I'd get booted. And that would be hindering my free speech on their platform. So all I'm saying, and look, I'll say it again, I don't have a problem with people having rules for their broadcast, but when you virtue signal from the highest point that you're the free speech outlet, and then you hinder free speech with restrictions, with strings attached, then you don't have free speech.
It's just so dumb. Every one of these people saying free speech, free speech. Let's be honest when we talk about free speech. It means the government can't throw you in jail for saying something. That's what free speech is.
Yeah.
Every other format, place, organization, they all have limits on our free speech. You can't yell out fire without a fire in a theatre. If I go down to the Octagon and spout a whole bunch of racist nonsense, I'm going to be punched in the face.
Yep.
And that's a limit on my free speech. Somebody has a problem with what I've said, and they're stopping me from saying it by removing some of my teeth. You know, that's the thing. There's no truly free speech without consequence. But when you hang it on your flagpole and you say we're the only platform for free speech, as you said, you are virtue signaling. You're standing on the mountaintop and going, this is what we're about. And you guys that I'm talking to, you know exactly what I mean. Don't you? Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. We can say some horrible things about women here. And that's what it is.
So if you're one of these people who has been going ballistic on my Twitter feed today, these are all mentions on my Twitter feed by all these people who are liking comments and stuff that were being made about, look here, like free speech and and how great it is. Be honest, right? Be honest. And be honest with yourselves. And be honest with, I don't have any problems with anyone listening to anything. If that's your cup of tea, go for it. But be honest. To claim you don't virtue signal and then to scream free speech with restrictions is virtue signaling.
Goes both ways.
Just be honest. That's all I'm asking. And it's perfectly fine for you to go, that's actually a fair point. You don't have to agree with me or Chewy or Suze or anything like that. But it's also okay for you to go, that's actually a really fair point. And the point that I'm making now is a really fair point. And I've got more of them. Hey, let's do another little clip because this is quite important. This is more about the platform and what it is, okay? Let me just play this little bit. It's a weird one because I'm actually playing over the introduction of this small clip, and it's only 1 or 2 sentences that I want. Have a listen.
If the media were good at doing their job, as the fourth estate, they wouldn't need a government subsidy to make money.
Okay, that's it. If the media were good at doing their job, they wouldn't need a government subsidy to do money. Now, Chewy, do you think the platform is currently making money, or do you think they have a whopping great investment, i.e. a subsidy, from an external group because they're not good at doing their job? So the measurement is, the metric is, you shouldn't need external money if you're good at your job. Yeah. So therefore, what does that say about the platform?
You're always going to be in someone's pocket, whether it is an investor or an advertiser, or you're sticking your hand out for government subsidies, which is nothing. There's nothing wrong with that. TVNZ has been a state broadcaster for decades, and they've been some of the harshest critics of a variety of governments throughout the decades. You can't say that they're in the government's pocket. You can't say Radio New Zealand is soft on the government. They never have been. You can flip a coin of whether I'm listening to Morning Report or something where I'm going to go, that's a really good point, or it's going to fuck me off. You know?
The point being as well, for some reason, and remember, Sean Plunket is known to us because of the public ticket, right? That's something to absolutely remember here. Another good point. Ta-ting! And just remember, what Sean Plunket is saying is taking a lump of money from this group, which happens to be a government, and using it to fund your media organization, bad. Taking a chunk of money from this group, private investors, and using it to fund your media organization, good.
That now, we don't know anything about these people
this is the point. I've never had ends on any funding for what I do, but I know people who do. They get audited. They have to justify what they're doing. They can get called into offices and they have to justify what they're spending. That's the public money. The private money goes like this. Shake hands behind closed doors. Nobody knows. So, for example, the investors into the platform, they don't want swearing. Now, I don't know this for a fact. This is conjecture, but it's pretty obvious to me that they're fairly conservative people. Yeah, I'm wondering out loud, and I don't know this, if they're Christians. And if they are, I wonder if any of Mr. Plunket's positions on these conversations has anything to do with his business partners' views around abortion. I wonder that, because I don't know. And when you've got private money coming in, you don't know what the strings could possibly be. We know that the strings are definitely swearing. We don't know what any of the other strings could be. So just because it's private money doesn't mean it's better. To me, it's like what he's saying is if you take public money, you can't make money off advertising or anything. Well, neither is the platform. They're taking private money to fund them for 2 years because they're not going to be profitable. Yeah. So they're a startup rather than getting money from a government agency. Whoop-de-doo.
Yeah, absolutely. I can think of a religious group that has been involved in bankrolling a whole lot of right-wing stuff, close involvement with the National Party.
Yep.
Straight off the bat.
Yep.
And,
can I just say,
I'd have a big question mark where that came from.
Can I just say that this show is going to go for quite a long time because we haven't started the 40-minute conversation yet. We're not actually onto the critique yet.
Sorry.
But
I'm a bit wound up.
It's fine. It's fine. And Chewy, you don't need to be around for the actual conversation I have with Suze, but there you go. Because I think probably it's time to get into the actual conversation this morning on the platform and have a bit of a look at it and see what it's all about. Remember, you can share your thoughts. You can stick a chat through. People are still talking about things. I don't know why someone said this, but me again said sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Ugh, I'm so old. People who decry against Te Reo being used are always the same people who argue hate speech should be free speech. Yeah,
it's funny that Venn diagram's a circle.
Yeah, and it goes on. Okay, so there's more to say and there's more to add, right? But what we want to do now is we're going to go through this. And Chewy, I don't know if you're a Sam Cedar watcher, but we talk about you can Sam Cedar this mother. So at any stage during this conversation, you can go, stop, and we can have a chat. I might stop it in some natural places, but you can also stop it at any stage you want. So let's have a look at the conversation this morning. Now, remember, this has really started from, let's just make this small again and have a look. This has really started from the conversation, meaning the conversation, and the article that was written by Dr. Suze Wilson over Luxons Dilemma, when politics and morals don't match in response to the overturning of Roe versus Wade. I'm fascinated to see some of Luxon's people here. I'm sorry, Luxon's people, slip of the tongue. Some of Plunket's people here, because what I would really like you to do is message me on the chat with what I've said that's wrong so far. Message me with the hole in my argument. I think you'll struggle personally, but go for it. Message me in the hole that you've heard in my synopsis so far, and Chewy's synopsis so far of what Mr. Plunket's all about, what he says and what he does. I genuinely want to hear it, and even if it's got sweary words in it, we'll probably share it. All right. So here's the conversation from this morning. One thing you need to know, which funnily enough, the platform cut out, was...
it's a subtle edit, though.
Oh, it's a subtle edit.
Barely tell.
Is that the producer for the show phoned Suze Wilson. Suze said, look, I don't have time. I'm just on the way to, it was a meeting or work or something. And then the next thing that happened was Suze's phone rang, and it was Sean Plunket phoning her live on air. So she had declined the interview, and then Plunket phoned her live on air. The bit that they've cut out is the part of the conversations which Suze told me about, probably still on their website, I guess, where she goes, is this live on air? But you haven't asked my permission to go live on air. And so that bit's, funnily enough, that's left out. I wonder if it's left out because it's bad form. Don't know about that. But let's have a listen.
I'm trying to get hold of Suze Wilson, who is a management lecturer at Massey University.
Can I say something else actually about technical thing? Hey, the platform, can you fucking get rid of those fisheye lenses? You look cheap and shitty. Like, for all the investment your investors have done, it looks horrific. Your actual technical skill set there and your layout is utterly shite. I'm doing this in the basement of my house with a 4K camera that looks 1,000 times better than what your shitty fisheye lens looks like. Sorry.
And it's basically written a hate letter to Chris Luxon and a love letter to Jacinda Ardern. I have your informed consent now?
What was that?
You do now,
Thank
but
you.
I've had to ask for it, which is not actually how it should work.
Okay. Can I ask you then, who asked you to write this piece that I think started in the conversation on Luxons Dilemma?
Okay, so challenging the academic on what's this all about? Who put you up to this? That's the first part.
Nobody asked me
How did you get it published?
because I pitched it to the publication, to the conversation, which I write for fairly frequently, because part of my role as an academic is to be engaged in public commentary.
Okay, a management academic, right? Not a political academic or a media academic?
So why do you think you're qualified to write something about Mr. Luxon? You're only involved with management. What's that all about?
Shitty.
Here we go.
Well, I'm a leadership scholar, and so I write about
And hang on, boom! I'm a leadership scholar. He's the leader of the National Party. Boom! Mic drop.
leadership in both organisational context and a political context, and I've been doing that for some time.
How long sometime?
Oh, are you qualified? Is your qualifications? Have you been in the game for long enough?
Well, I completed my PhD in 2013, so I started my study for that in 2008. And before that, I actually was involved in leadership roles.
Can you say this? Look at this shitty setup they've got. Look.
I was just looking at the extension cord.
Crappy warehouse.
Daisy chained extension cords.
And to be honest, this basically will do nothing to the sound because it's all projecting forward. I mean, you can't really see them. I normally have them on show. I've got my sound. I've got all of my walls completely covered here. This shitty little basement studio. But look at this. Look at this pile of crap. If I was your investors, your conservative, non-sweary business mummy and daddy, I would want to get a second opinion on the studio, just between you and me.
Why would you have a rubbish bin in the shop?
What sort of leadership roles?
Oh, please give us your qualifications, because if you're not qualified well enough, what are you doing writing this?
So I was a Deputy Commissioner at the State Services Commission. I was General Manager of Human Resources at New Zealand Post. I was a Senior Manager at Ministry of Education and also Math. I was president of the New Zealand University Students Association, president of the University of Canterbury Students Association, held a senior role in a trade union.
You see that grin there?
Okay, ever been a member of a political party?
Never.
Coming from the man who was the communications director for the top party?
Yeah, he did a fucking great job there too.
2.2%, I believe. But hang on. I mean, I would assume, now this is an assumption, that if you're the director of a political party, chances are you were a member. Do you think you could be a director? You maybe not, but someone who has public and definite allegiances to political parties, questioning someone else on their political allegiance like it's a weapon. Like, I'm going to weaponize this because if you're a member of the Labour Party, we're not going to take it seriously from someone who has worked for, been paid for by political parties.
Wind it back a little bit and look at his reaction when she says she was involved in student politics.
Yeah.
Canterbury Students Association, held a senior role in a trade union,
Smarmy
so
prick.
those kinds of things.
Okay, ever been a member of a political party?
Never.
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 Wow, trade unionist, student politician, never been a member of a political party.
Also worked in management for more time than I ever worked for a trade union, so don't make assumptions on the basis of
Okay,
the
you've
different
written
roles
your
I've
piece
had.
largely based on the Roe versus Wade hysteria.
Now, Chewy, I'm obviously operating the system here. I want you to be a little bit more cognizant of this than I am, and we'll check it at the end. I'm not saying necessarily exacting times. So really the interview hasn't started yet, right, about the actual conversation.
No, this is
piece.
an interrogation.
Yeah. Just take a mental note, make some notes down, jot some times, whatever you want to do while I'm pausing and that kind of stuff, for how long he talks versus she talks on the free speech channel. The thing that the platform does is they say, well, come on and debate us. Come on, if you have a view that's different, that's fine. Come on and talk about it. Forget the platform, forget Sean Plunket. Think about having a conversation in a pub with someone like this. Would they be having a conversation with you from a different perspective, or would they be berating you and trying to shout you down? Just think about it from a personal perspective and see what you think.
Area that has affected New Zealand. Are you aware of the clear and unambiguous comments made by Christopher Luxon regarding the status quo on abortion law settings in New Zealand?
Yes, my article talks about how emphatic he's been in making those statements.
Yet you still say he has a dilemma. Why?
Because there's an obvious dilemma for a pro-choice person having to support abortion laws in New Zealand.
And for someone that is supposedly politically neutral, that definitely sounds like some editorializing in his questions there.
Well, the other thing is, the dilemma is, one of his dilemmas is, because he has denounced this. So this is the thing, right? This is why now Sean Plunket's being disingenuous, right? Because if Jacinda Ardern said something before the next election, he would not be saying, well, she's unequivocally said it, so we have to believe her. He'd be going, I don't believe her. I don't believe she's going to stick by that, because that wouldn't suit his political narrative. So if you're not going to allow it it's the hypocrisy of what will happen. Right, so what he's basically saying is, Mr. Luxon has said it, so you must trust him. If you don't trust him, then you're just doing a hit piece on him. I guarantee you there'll be times between now and the next election where he won't trust, he won't believe something that the left has said will or won't happen after the election. I guarantee it. In fact, I'm willing to put a slightly high wager on it.
He has a dilemma because his personal position is that he's anti-abortion. He's on record as accepting that a pro-choice position regards abortion as tantamount to murder. He's on record as stating that his faith is very important to him, and he's on record as also stating that he doesn't believe that matters of faith, that politicians should impose those issues on the wider public. So those are statements.
So I don't see any dilemma there.
Mate. Well, if you'd let me explain. The difficulty is that he's now prepared to put aside all of those issues on the basis of understanding that there just simply isn't public support for his position. And so what that shows us about his character is that he's more swayed towards a pragmatist position rather than a values-based position.
That's not a dilemma, that's a position.
Well, are you going to let me explain
He's
or
not
not?
even
Because
listening.
I do need to actually get to my meeting, and I think we're at our 3 minutes anyway.
Carry on.
Oh, so you're going to let me explain. Okay. So what he's done is he's made a series of statements which show overall that he's more of a pragmatist position than a values-based position. Now, no leader is going to be solely one nor the other, okay? And no person is going to be perfect, and politics is complicated. All of that really matters. But the dilemma is that he's shown to us that he is very quick to set aside something that presumably is a strongly held personal belief because of what is politically tenable. And that therefore
Bingo.
raises the question that if the political landscape changes, will his position on abortion laws change? And then in my article, I cite a range of evidence that shows that we should not assume that the political dynamics in terms of people's attitudes toward these things will not in fact change.
So that was actually quite a, let's be honest, he gave her a good amount of time there to answer.
Yep.
And it's very clear what she's saying is, and this is clear in the article, that he's made his position, his pragmatic position now based on what is tenable in society, what we society think. If society shifts, and if society was to become more conservative and more say that they would like to see some restrictions on abortion in New Zealand, then his dilemma is, would he shift with it? So it's quite a simple concept. Yeah. And I think it's perfectly fair that Mr. Luxon's being pragmatic right now based on populist politics, based on the population saying, don't you dare go near abortion. If when he's the leader, the population was to change that position, the society was to be more welcoming of a more conservative view, his dilemma is, would he then change his view? Now, I don't know whether Plunket's not getting it or just playing games, but that's crystal, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about this a couple of times as politicians take positions and then often they review them, often when they're out of office, and they go, hey, look, I was wrong on this. I was wrong on marriage equality. I was wrong on this, that, and the other thing. There's nothing wrong with being a pragmatist as a politician. The problem is when you try to have a bob each way and go, I have deeply held beliefs and I have very strong beliefs that this is the very strong thing I believe it to be. And then literally, a couple of weeks later, you're like, well, I'm still not going to do anything about it, though. He can't review it and say, hey, look, I've listened to what the electorate have said and I understand the position that puts me in. I'd have more respect from him if he said that.
Yeah, I agree with him. I think we've said it many, many times. People like John Key and that who kept I personally benefited from interest-free student loans and working for families, but I would have respected John Key more to come in to actually be honest and say, these are not national policies, we're getting rid of them. But he had to play the populist game, and I respect him less for it because he wouldn't actually go, well, this is what National stands for, this is what Labor stands for. If you want that, vote Labor. If you want this, vote us. He basically adopted a bunch of Labor policies because he wanted to get in.
And I have that exact problem with Labor now, is that I want them to be more Labor instead of where they are in the middle, where they're like, well, we're a bit Labor, but we're also a bit national. Vote for us. And
let's keep going on this because we are going to be here. We definitely don't want to be here beyond midnight. We've still got the interview to come, and I'm cool with that. I'm absolutely fine to leave it running and keep on going, but let's keep going with the Inquisition of the Hour, because it kind of starts now, I think.
Seemed to me, to be honest, Suze, any different than the Prime Minister's ambiguous stance on marijuana law reform.
So this is now called whataboutism.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point.
What about, but hang on. What about what the Prime Minister said? And why didn't you write about this in your article? And the reason is that wasn't the topic she was writing about. She was writing about the dilemma for Luxon. He brings up Nanai Mahusa later on. What about? But he wasn't writing about Nanai Mahusa.
Issue where she was exactly the same as Luxon.
No, she wasn't exactly the same, and let me explain why. So firstly, abortion versus marijuana are not matters of the same moral weight. Okay? Not in any way, shape or form.
Who says?
She said just then.
Well, because
that's her academic position.
Engage in some moral reasoning for a moment, shall we? The argument from the pro-choice lobby is that abortion is tantamount to murder. And murder, I think we can
But
all
Roe versus
agree,
Wade has nothing to do with New Zealand, and Mr. Luxon says it doesn't change anything according to his party.
Look,
so what
do
I'm
you want-
saying
do you
is,
want me to answer
you're,
your-
no, what I'm saying is you're
No.
engaged in a
Mr.
political
Plunket.
narrative from a biased perspective.
No, that's bollocks. I'm just explaining the moral reasoning. There is no moral
Bang on.
equivalent between a position in relation to cannabis law versus abortion.
Yeah, but surely your piece was about leadership, not the
murder.
issue, because that's what you're an expert in, is
was it?
leadership.
It wasn't about that.
Yeah, and
No.
I've explained what I've been trying to get to is the moral reasoning, the questions of character and integrity that his approach to this raises.
Which is just as
raises
questionable
questions.
as Jacinda Ardern's morally questionable position on marijuana law reform and her refusal to commit, in fact, stop some progressive legislation going through, stop the referendum.
Whataboutism?
Well, she actually explained what her position on that was, which is
And
that she did
Luxon's
what was
actually explained what his
public.
position as well, but you don't seem interested in listening to what he has to say.
No, excuse me, I accepted those are his statements. What I
Are you
said
okay, Chewy?
is if the landscape changes,
Do you need a cuddle, Chewy? Are you okay?
can we trust that his position won't change?
So
given
basically, you're
he
just
is showing
questioning
his-
his integrity from your personal position.
Yes.
Well, she doesn't say
No,
yes to
not
this,
his
but I
personal
guess that's what I'm
position on the
doing.
basis of
I'm questioning his character and his integrity.
moral reasoning criteria and evidence.
Are you a lecturer in
that
morals
shows
or
us-
are you a lecturer in management and leadership?
I'm a lecturer in leadership.
So that's an interesting one, though. Are you a lecturer in morals or are you a
Because
lecturer in
leaders don't
leadership?
have morals.
But what qualifications does Mr. Plunket or anyone on the platform have to say to talk about morals or morality or any of those things? Are they qualified in it? See what I'm saying about that's the hypocrisy of the pompous, pious, communicator.
Which naturally involves me engaging in issues about ethical analysis, and I have published in the Journal of Business Ethics because quite a lot of my work engages with different philosophical traditions, different ethical traditions. I've also published work in the virtue ethics tradition. So actually I'm quite strongly grounded in ethical theory as part of my engagement with leadership.
Hang on, there was just mic drop. Just do that quickly and then keep going.
Research.
Any training in journalism?
Oof.
Why?
Yeah,
No.
Why
why?
does that matter?
Interesting. Okay, do you get paid for that piece you wrote?
No.
Thank
what-
goodness for that.
And what would that matter?
Suze, I'll let you get to your meeting. Cheers. Suze Wilson there, author of a rather questionable piece published all over the left-wing woke media in New Zealand. Interesting.
We're gonna touch
Interesting.
on this
Didn't
point.
choose to raise the moral dilemma of Jacinda Ardern and the marijuana law reform. Why? Because she was doing a hit piece. She's a former student
Because she
politician,
wasn't
like
writing
and
about
the
that.
ministers.
It also
Former
happened
trade
years ago.
unionist, and she's had management
have a
roles,
listen.
all deeply rooted within the public service and bureaucracy of Wellington. I will let that interview and her attitude stand on its own merits.
So we're not going to watch the follow-up bit that they do and shoot it. But here's something I wanted to say. So you heard him made a big deal about the left-wing media, and this is all over the left-wing media, and, this is the left-wing position. And so Matthew Hooson was a staffer for the National Party until very recently. Was, I believe, an advisor or something for the New Conservative Party. I could be wrong on that, but I have seen some written up that he was involved with the New Conservative Party as a lobbyist, that may be wrong. But there's no question that Matthew Hooson is a right wing commentator and a right wing lobbyist. Yeah.
Yeah.
So hang on. This is what he wrote, right? Remember what we've talked about. We've been a bit more abrupt with this, saying that we figure that if you are not trying everything you can to stop murder, you must be pro-murder, tongue in cheek. But the question of that is the dilemma that he faces. So Suze said it in a different way. That's how we've said it. Here's what Matthew Hooson, right-wing lobbyist, right-wing commentator, right-wing political advisor, has said. Christopher Luxon can't possibly believe abortion is murder. If he does, he's a moral cretin, if not for the belief itself, then for failing to act upon it. If you think abortion is murder, you don't devote your life to selling deodorant in Canada or bums on seats in New Zealand. You immediately act to stop it. Matthew Hooson is a woke left-wing lunatic, according to Sean Plunket, because maybe arose by any other name, i.e. with different words, he's saying exactly what she said. She's saying exactly what we've been joking about for most of the week to do with Christopher Luxon being pro-murder. And it's the outlier here is Sean Plunket.
Yeah, like there's so much wrong with that ambush. There's so much from both just a fairness, free speech point of view, from a broadcasting standards, from a veteran broadcaster point of view. I have a serious dislike for just terminating the phone call and then going to editorialize what you think of this woman who just got called up out of the blue while she's trying to go to a meeting. Rather than going through channels and going, hey, I'd like to have a chat about this article. When's a good time? We can do a pre-record, whatever. There's just so much wrong with it. It's like he's an onion made of shit. Just every layer you peel off, it gets shittier. Like, and honestly, I have to say, it's not because he's blocked me on Twitter. That is hurtful, but I've put that aside.
That's a bit of a problem around free speech, isn't it? He's stopping
just a little bit. And if I remember rightly, it goes back to him being the media advisor for Top. And I think I read, because I thought Top had some good ideas. And I think I reached out to him and said something going, you are just screwing up every message that they have by being yourself.
Well, I wonder if it's because he wasn't getting paid by the government in his 2 jobs that have given him all his profile. That maybe, I mean, he worked for ZB for a while, didn't really seem to work there. He worked for, I think, Radio Live or Magic Talk for a while, didn't really seem to work there. So he started his own thing. It seems to me, and this is conjecture, but that the time he's found success is when he's been on the public teat.
And he's just surrounded himself with other people that have been sacked from things.
Let's have a look at a couple of things, yeah? Then we're going to go on to the interview, and I'm not sorry at all because I've enjoyed this out immensely. Funnily enough, though, just to say, we haven't had anyone come in and point out any of the holes in my argument yet, Chewy. I'm inviting that. I'm inviting people to point out the holes in my argument. Haven't had that yet, but there was Twitter went a bit crazy today. In fact, it's still going crazy right now. My phone's buzzing all over the place. I'll just bring the screen back up again. For people who are messaging both in support of the Sean Plunket situation and in support of Suze Wilson as well. I mean, Suze Wilson put out a tweet today, which I actually think was one of the sort of saddest indictments of, what Sean Plunket did. I'm just seeing if I can find it. I didn't have it loaded up. But basically she said, look, you work all your life, you pay all your bills, you pay all your taxes, you get qualified, and then you get told you're a virus that needs to leave the face of the planet. And I'm just like, But what I wanted to do was just say, I just grabbed a couple of examples, because I think I say in this conversation with Suze, which we're going to play next, that the audience that Plunket is going for are the QAnon people. I'm not saying everyone who listens to Sean Plunket isn't QAnon, but they're the anti-vaxxer, hate Jacinda Ardern, QAnon part, and the thing is they're also easily monetizable because they're not very smart. I thought what I'd do is just grab a couple of people who have liked the tweets that have gone out supporting Sean Plunket, just to have a look at who he is, who is he pitching to. Here's one, and this is public domain because it's on Twitter. His name is Claude. He's a patriot, a Christian with pro-life values and a free thinker. Hate progressives. He's a free thinker. I'm a free thinker, but I hate progressive and liberal politics. But I'm a free speaker and a freedom junkie. And if you go through the feed of this random person I've selected, who is the people that Sean Plunket is pitching to, it is full of people faking photos between Zelensky and that Cassidy Hutchinson, I think her name was telling lies to the select committee. This
person works in a troll farm.
So, and then I just picked another one at random. This person is called Dr. Salty Kiwi. Free Israel, resign Jacinda, co-governance apartheid, end male food poverty. I'm not sure what that one is. And it's all the same. I don't know. Maybe his missus isn't feeding him enough if he's indeed got a missus. He might be an incel. But the first kind of tweet here, the first thing about the new Maori Health Authority is they changed their name, fucking Muppets. So So you don't take it too seriously, people who have sprang up to defend Suze. Those are the people that Sean Plunket is speaking to. And someone said it so well in the tweets before about, isn't it funny, all of those people who want free speech are the ones that adhere to a lot of hate speech ideology. I'm paraphrasing it, but that's his audience, right? And part of me kind of goes, you go and have them. Go and have them. You know, you can all make a little incel group, you know, somewhere in Wellington.
It's called Telegram.
Telegram, or I was going to say, or Boomer. What's that one called? Boomerang, or there's a B one as well. You know, I can't think of it right now.
A social media platform called Boomer, centered around Sean Plunket. Sounds like genius.
But that's his audience, right? That's the audience of the platform. And when I put out a tweet that I was going to talk to Suze tonight about her article, which is kind of what we want to do, and also about the Sean Plunket experience, they came out of the woodwork. It was kind of hilarious. Chewy, you messaged me saying, what a bunch of bullying fuckwits. I know you said cunts, didn't you? Or something.
Yes, I did say cunts.
I found it mostly hilarious.
But it's also, it's straight misogyny.
Yeah.
Like, that's always been Plunket's thing, that he picks on women. He doesn't like Jacinda because she's a woman. He's berated this woman that he's called out of the blue on his little platform. You know, women were going to destroy New Zealand rugby.
You have to be careful with a little bit because they're bigger than us, but that's not saying much.
What is it going to be like Anchorman, where we fight in a car park?
We are the skinniest kids. We are the skinniest kids at Fat Camp in this whole world of public commentary. So they're fatter than us, metaphorically speaking. But yeah, you know, it's that. But I don't want that audience. You know, like we've said about Mr. Luxon when he had those racist statements on his Facebook page, and he came out going, "Oh, they weren't even saying anything anti-Māori. They were saying it towards me, and they were saying it to you, Mr. Luxon, because you're married, because you used Māori, because you spoke the Māori language, so they attacked you. If you hadn't spoken the Māori language, they wouldn't have attacked you. So what they're doing is attacking the Māori language that you used." The only correct response from that is for Mr. Luxon to go, "If you truly believe that Te Reo should never be spoken in this land, then National does not want your vote." But know what that is? That's one of Luxon's dilemmas. Because he wants their vote, he needs their vote, but he can't be seen to be endorsing their racist views. Again, for people who are just joining us, I'm not saying National voters are racist. I'm saying if you're a white supremacist, if that's your ideology, if you're someone that thinks the bloody Maoris are getting too much or whatever, then the likely place you vote is on the right. You don't get too many people who are anti-co-governance on the left so much. I mean, you do, because it can come down to assets. And there's actually some good arguments for there, but it's not the arguments that people like Sean Plunket and his followers are typically putting out there. Well, listen, Sue, we're going to go into an interview soon, but I mean, you're not sweating, so that's a good thing. Is there anything you want to add to the end of this conversation about Sean Plunket, about the platform, anything about that conversation so far? Just for people who know, Suze is going to come up now. It's a pre-recorded interview. I'll be sitting in the studio while it's happening, and I'll be putting comments up if they are coming through. And also, we talk about the article. Crazy as that may seem, we actually talk about the article, and then we do have a chat towards the end of the conversation with Suze about her experiences on the platform. So there's more of that to come. But Chewy, I mean, it's going to be a gap now of half an hour or 40 minutes. You're welcome to stick around and play in the chat, or you're welcome to piss off and do other things. Whatever you want to do is all fine.
I'll probably still be in the chat because I do want to catch the interview as well.
Well, is anything you want to wrap up here about Sean? Or if you're going to stick in the chat, we'll just talk at the end.
Yeah, Sean Plunket is the worst. I think that's I've just underlined that.
I like Radar. We've had Radar on a couple of times, and one of the things. Oh, that's not right. I've just opened up the wrong. I didn't have the right interview. Gosh, hang on a sec. Let me find the right interview. I had Radar on a couple of times, and we were talking about David Seymour, ironically enough, and the point he made, and he's made it a couple of times, is he goes, why does ACT hate New Zealand so much? He just says it over and over again, and I can see why. Let me just check. Hopefully I haven't made an error here with this interview. I've got it. It's actually, I think the interview is actually already up on YouTube, so I could just go play it off there. But let me just make sure I've got this right. Hang on, give me a sec. Right?
Just while you're looking for that, I'll give a shout out to Caitlin Spice in the comments.
Go for it.
She's just been nailing it. So many good comments.
On fire.
Yeah, gold standard chat, Caitlin.
Okay. And look, the other thing, Chew, is we haven't talked about Rogue One yet either, so maybe we can wrap up the show with that, because I did watch it tonight and I have some
Good
questions.
boy.
So let's go to this conversation I had this afternoon with Dr. Suze Wilson on Luxons Dilemma and her experiences with Sean Plunket. And I will definitely be back, and Chewy will probably be back at the end of this conversation. Keep the chats going. We'll put them up if we see them on there. Chewy, you feel free to put them up as well. And other than that, enjoy. That this is, if anyone's watching who's a fan of Sean Plunket, this is called an interview, right? You may not have seen one for a while or heard one for a while, but this is called an interview with a guest that you invite on. Just so you know, that's what this is. All right, talk to you soon. From Massey University, senior lecturer in the School of Management, Dr. Suze Wilson, who's becoming quite viral today, apparently, but we'll talk about that in a minute. G'day, Suze, how you doing? You doing all right?
Yeah, I'm doing okay.
We've been talking about this already this evening, and we'll talk about it some more with you more briefly, but we actually have you here to talk about an article that you wrote for The Conversation, which is one of the reasons that you've become a little bit viral in the last 12 to 18 hours. But I want to talk to you about the article, because I think the article that you've written is something that I've been talking about on this show, and we've been talking about on this show for quite a while. And that is, quote, Luxons Dilemma, as we look at it right now. When politics and morals don't match in response to the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Now, I don't think it's just about Roe versus Wade. I think that Mr. Luxon has a dilemma in several areas. One of the areas, we've talked about this previously before we go into your conversation, was when he had all those racist comments on his Facebook page. And he had the problem of needing those racist commenters' votes, so he couldn't really denounce them. And we talked about this last night. It had the vibe from Mr. Luxon of there was wonderful people on both sides. You know, the old Trumpian claim about all great people on both sides of the white supremacy issue. It had, I'm not so saying it was the same, but it had that vibe around it of, I have to placate these people who may or may not sit with my ideology because I need their vote. But the truth is, I should probably come out against them. And so it's fine. That's a dilemma. It's a dilemma for Mr. Luxon that doesn't seem to be so much on the left. I mean, one could argue that, you know, maybe the left, whether it be a Marama or a Jacinda, might be like distancing themselves from something like Antifa. But even then, many of those people might actually not distance themselves from those. It's more ideologically where they sit anyway. So there is a definite dilemma on the right. And we're talking about Mr. Luxon being the leader of the right, but I think it's a dilemma around the country. Your one was talking about Roe versus Wade, and it was because obviously Mr. Luxon has identified himself as pro-life and has identified that abortion is akin to murder. One sentence from your story, and then we'll jump into it. Talking about the abortion issue and the overturning of Roe versus Wade, you say, this has left the opposition leader, Christopher Luxon, with a dilemma. He found himself caught up in questions that put a spotlight on his pro-life values, politics, and integrity. Can you unpack that a bit for us, please, Suze?
Yeah, so, I mean, any leader, and particularly any political leader, is always going to have to juggle a range of competing kind of issues, right? And we know that there are some things that we should reasonably expect politicians are able to have private views on, and that doesn't necessarily have to be an issue raised in the public domain. You know, not every thought that passes their mind needs to be in the public domain, or should be. They have some right to privacy. But he has specifically, you know, been open about having a pro-life position. And he's also said in his maiden speech that, you know, he doesn't think that it's appropriate that politicians should seek to, you know, force their beliefs on others. And he's talked about his Christian faith and so on and so forth. Yeah. And so to one extent you go, well, okay, all well and good. But abortion is a very hotly contested political issue. As you've said, his pro-life stance equates abortion with murder. Murder is kind of like the morally worst thing that you could do.
Yeah.
And so you would expect a politician who holds that view to be thinking very carefully about what their stance is in relation to abortion policy. And he's been very reluctant to talk about that over the last week. He doesn't want to explain to us how he reconciles that. And instead he's just kind of said, it's not an issue here, it's not an issue here, it's not an issue here, we won't do anything, we promise we won't do anything. And then you go, well, okay, so he's promised, is that the end of it? Because that's clearly what he hopes will be the case. But the issue is what he's shown is that he's prepared to trade what for him is a very important value, you would think.
Maybe the most important value.
Yeah. In order to do what is at the moment politically expedient. And so my question is, well, if the political landscape changes then, given we know now that this is what he's willing to do, trade a sacred value for what is politically expedient.
Yep.
If the political landscape changes, and there's a lot of evidence suggesting that those forces are gathering, you know, will that position hold?
Yeah.
And you know, so it speaks to kind of a question of his character and his integrity, is that he says that these values are very important to him, but when push comes to shove, he won't kind of take the heat that comes with that and be clear to us about what his reasoning is. He'll just try and brush it away and do what's expedient. And so that raises questions, I think, about integrity and character.
Oh, look, and I think you're spot on, right? We talked a bit about this last night, and you'll appreciate, Suze, that often our show is sort of a stream of consciousness. It's like we're just having a chat around a table with a beer sort of thing. But one of the things I sort of realized in the middle of last night's show, when we were talking to disinformation researcher Byron Clark, was, hang on, if you're, I mean, I think most of us are anti-murder, and most of us want to see murder go away.
Yes.
Therefore, if you think abortion is murder, then logic would say you want to see that go away. Murder is criminal. Murder is a crime against another human being. As you say, murder is kind of the worst of the worst. So there is a now disconnect in my mind that if Mr. Luxon truly believes that abortion is murder, he either wants it to go away, and if he's put in a position to help make that decision be made with a majority government or with a mixed member proportional government, why wouldn't he try and do it? Now, there's a big part of me which kind of still says it's unlikely that National is going to push for this, but I think the dilemma and the question is still there, because if you believe that action, we'll just call it action A, is murder, you are in a position to try and stop action A, i.e. stopping murders. And if you choose not to do that, that either says you don't believe action A is murder. And I'm saying action A because whatever that thing was that caused the murder, right? Whatever, you either believe that action A isn't murder, and that means you're lying to your Christian base. I actually wrote this down before, so I'll make sure I get my three points right. You actually think it is murder, but you're ignoring it, which makes you a sociopathic hypocrite. Or it means that maybe when you get a chance to change a law to help stop, option A being murdered, you're going to do it. And they seem to be the only three logical outcomes to me. And I think all three of those, no matter which one it is, are a pretty appalling outcome for, say, the rest of New Zealand and New Zealand political law as well.
I mean, I think the path he's been trying to take through that is to say that this is a matter of personal conscience, I'm not going, even if I've got the political power, I'm not going to do anything about it. But it's a huge trust me ask, right?
Yeah.
And particularly because he's not prepared to talk in any depth around explaining his thinking around these issues, the trust me becomes even bigger, an even bigger ask. And, he's only been an MP since 2020. He's only been the leader for 6 or 7 months. As a voting population, we don't really know a lot about him yet.
Yeah.
We haven't seen him tested to be able to predict in any real fashion, be able to kind of predict how he might he might react. But what we do have is, there's clear evidence of, well, yes, I think this, but no, I won't act on it. And the reason I'm not acting on it because it is basically because it's not politically convenient to do so.
Yeah.
Which tells us, okay, more pragmatist than idealist, more expedient than principled. Okay, so right now the politics are okay in terms of protecting abortion rights because most New Zealanders agree with that. But if that changes, is he willing to go with this way? And if we look at, really how Roe versus Wade has been overturned in the US, it's through decades of effort to seed fundamentalist Christians into positions of power until ultimately they could appoint their own into the Supreme Court to get this decision. So, there is no certainty that what we have now is protected at all. It is very much clearly a matter for ongoing debate, and him trying to say to us the matter is settled and that's the end of it. It's just not. It shows no understanding of actually how political landscapes can change. And I thought he also seemed to be overreaching and saying, nobody in my caucus can do anything about this because it's treated as a conscience vote in Parliament. It can come up via a private member's bill, and he can't stop a member of his caucus raising a private member's bill without overreaching his authority.
Yep.
Which would be a worry. You don't want leaders who are going to overreach their authority. And we know that 2/3 of that current caucus voted against the decriminalisation. So there's this, he's trying to paint things in a far more simplistic fashion than the reality at stake actually is.
I think also that one of the problems with him, you talking about it's settled law, is that's exactly what Brett Kavanaugh said.
Yes.
And then he just either changed his mind or he said it to get to the position he needed to get to, and then was part of the reason it got overturned. So, and I'm not accusing Mr. Luxon of this, but we have very recent history of a person in a political position saying one thing and using the word settled, and then within a couple of years doing the opposite. So that's also in the mindset. Again, I'm being clear not to accuse Mr. Luxon if he's going to do that, but the just trust me idea, which is what you're saying, that's basically what Brett Kavanaugh said. Just trust me, and then went against it. So, and I also think that it would be naive of us to say that all the promises that get made pre-election, forget that it's abortion, whatever they are, all those promises then get adhered to through the first, second, third term of a government. Inevitably, I mean, we're seeing it at the moment with the capital gains tax and the Labour Party. Jacinda said prior to the last election, while I'm Prime Minister, there won't be a capital gains tax. The word now is we haven't made that decision for next year. If that changes, how would that be any different from a promise Mr. Luxon saying now? I don't mean how would it be any different in much of importance, but in of what I say pre-election to what I do post-election.
Yeah, and as much as possible, we as voting citizens, we want to be able to make an informed decision. So we want those who are trying to get our vote to be as transparent as they can about what their commitments and their values and their views are, so that we can figure out where we stand, and the kind of the continued brushing off, nothing to see here, definitely nothing to see here. I get that he is very intent on trying to reassure people there is not a problem. It's very clear that's his strategy, and he may well be sincere, but there's a bigger landscape at play here, and he's shown expediency is what will prevail.
I think we all know as well, as soon as people start saying there's nothing to see here or intimating that, often there's something to see here. Methinks the lady does protest this too much a little bit. With there's nothing to see, often that's a pretty good place to look.
Yeah. I was particularly struck the other day when Amy Adams came out, with such a strong statement that, the National Party will definitely not be, changing the abortion laws. So as the former deputy leader, now no longer in Parliament, we've not heard any, or not that I've seen any public comment from her for months. She comes out very, very strongly, and I do just wonder what kind of internal debates are actually happening there, because, it is, with that 2/3 of the current caucus being so conservative, it seems to me that the liberal wing, the socially liberal wing of the National Party appears quite concerned about how Mr. Luxon was going to handle this situation. And almost in some sense, the sense almost was that he was being pressured into trying to say, we won't do anything. We definitely won't do anything. We really won't. Have we, and by the way, let me tell you what women think in this country.
Yeah. Hey, now, you are in the School of Management, the Oral Management School, and one of the things your article wrote about, to get back to why we originally started talking, was about Mr. Luxon's leadership. I want to read something else from it and maybe get you to speak to that. You're talking about principle and pragmatism in leadership. It has long been argued good leadership is underpinned by strength of character, a clear moral compass and integrity. In other words, consistency between one's words and actions. Whether a leader possesses the prudence to gauge what is a practically wise course of action in a given situation that upholds important values, or simply panders to what is politically safe and expedient, offers insights into their character. We sometimes have talked on this show a little bit about you don't really know what someone is unless you know what's happening behind closed doors. And we don't say that to want to know what's going on, for example, in the bedroom. But I've had conversations before with Don Brash, for example, in a podcast where I've said, actually, your character is what gets shown when no one's looking. And I wonder how much this relates to that. And this relates to, you're talking about insights into one's character. Because what you can say publicly, like I'll say it again, if you really thought that this, like if we thought that, I don't know, let's say firearms caused a lot of murder, and we had the opportunity to remove all firearms, therefore there'd be no firearms murders, and then we just didn't do it, it would speak to our character. And so what do you think about that? And how does this, even though we are making a bit of an assumption or an assertion based on the logical, flow on from these comments, what this says of Mr. Luxon's character, especially when it comes to leadership?
Yeah. Gauging a political leader's character is, it's difficult. To try and build that picture, you want to be able to, monitor their behaviour in multiple situations over an extended period of time.
Yep.
But the whole kind of character tradition as well, it's not only what you do when nobody's looking, it's also this idea of that under pressure, your true character will start to show. Okay, so there's this notion that crises are a crucible of leadership, and where we really get to see what is the true character of the person. And in that regard, because Mr. Luxon is a relatively new MP, we don't have much of a sense of that. But I think what we have seen is when he is feeling under pressure, he does tend to be quite dismissive and defensive. And that's a concern, I think, because if he is going to be our next Prime Minister, we want someone who can kind of emotionally handle the heat of the job and stay calm. And I think, regardless of what people's views might be about the policies that Ardern has pursued, it's hard to object to the proposition that under pressure she's really calm, and that's been enormously important to this country in the last few years. So, I will be very interested as we move into the election campaign next year, and he actually gets harder interviews than he's typically getting now. Yep. When he goes head to head with Ardern, what will we actually see about what he's like under pressure, because he hasn't had much so far.
But when you do see it, as there was an interview last week with Suze Ferguson on RNZ, yes. And she held his feet to the fire we covered it here. If people want to go and have a look, go to our go to our YouTube channel, and there'll be a clip there with Susie Ferguson's face as the thumbnail. You'll find it. But one of the things that happened in that conversation is that when he was pushing her, he was like, "Hey, listen," and I was a bit like, "Ooh, yes." It was a fairly aggressive sort of, can you just shut up for a minute? He didn't say that, but that's the vibe. Like when it happened, both me and I think I was on with Chewy, both were like, "Oh, well, that's like a real," and then also when he was with Jack Tame on TVNZ, and basically Jack Tame pressured him and got him to say that his changes wouldn't change inflation one bit whatsoever. It seems that at the moment the National Party, and probably rightfully so, let's be fair, are in a cycle of Labor's terrible. They're not in a cycle of National's amazing. Because what we do in this country often is we vote out governments, we don't vote in parties. So what they're doing at the moment is they're telling us all the reasons why we shouldn't vote for Labour. Then when he's getting pressure on why should we vote for National, he stumbles. And that's what's happening at the moment for some people, like those two examples who do push and pressure him.
Yeah, this is where I think his prior experience, which generally he wants to paint as a strength, I think could be potentially a weakness for him. So there's no doubt, he's held leadership roles at a very senior level previously. We all know he used to be the chief executive of an airline.
Yeah.
We've all heard him mention that many, many times. But being the chief executive of a business corporation is really nothing like being prime minister. It's not even really anything like being a politician, because the power dynamics within an organisation where you work, really is that ultimately what the boss says goes. Okay, and you can raise ideas, you can debate. If the culture is more conducive, maybe you can have quite a robust debate with the boss, and that's ideally what you would hope is happening. But ultimately, there is this power dynamic of, if you're going to try and challenge the boss, you'll be shown the door. And we all know that. And so for someone who's been in management roles really for most of his career, mostly that's the power dynamic in which he's been situated.
Yeah.
That if somebody who is a subordinate challenges him, he can just shut them down. That's what bosses can do.
Yep.
That's not what it's like in the political domain. Journalists will not be shut down in that manner, and normal citizens. And it takes a lot, I think, of practice and experience to learn how to withstand, that kind of scrutiny and that kind of challenge without getting all like this. And he doesn't have much of that experience yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I also saw someone writing last week, I actually can't remember who it was, but they made the point, when you're the CEO, you pick the team that's around you and you can handpick who you want to work with. When you're the leader of a political party, the team around you picks you. And you might be left with numerous people who don't fit with your ideology, your work ethic, your whatever. And so it's a very different dynamic, as you're saying, from being a CEO and being the person who employs, decides, all those things, because it's literally reversed when you're the leader of a political party.
Yeah. So that's a relatively untested area for him, where he has less experience. So Dern, I think, had been an MP for 8 years when she became leader of the Labour Party.
And kind of became leader, not particularly wanting it, from what I understand. So it was also that thing that she was kind of thrust into that position. And I wonder sometimes, without kind of being too Pollyanna about Jacinda Ardern, but if you're not actively looking for it, if it's not something that you're actively seeking in that moment, you know what they say, if you want to be a politician, that should be the one thing that kind of eliminates you from being a politician. It's the people that don't want to be that make the best politicians. I wonder if that's the same with the current Prime Minister, as I say, without being Pollyanna, but it's a little thought I've had.
Well, yeah. I mean, and again, that it is something that actually is discussed in kind of leadership research, that while it's important that people who are in a leadership role, have some level of self-belief that they deserve to be there.
Yep.
Wanting to be there for the power of it, for the glory of it, for the status of it, actually really matters. And those who go after leadership roles for those reasons, are not good leaders. And unfortunately, people who like power, status, and glory actually go for leadership roles. So there's some really interesting research around. So they call it the dark triad of personality. So psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and narcissism. That kind of cluster of personality disorders are overrepresented in leadership roles. Okay.
Yeah.
So, because they like the power, they like the prestige, and they're often really charming. So they're confident. So people at first impression think they look like a really good leader.
Yeah.
But they're really just there for themselves, and they have no moral compass or compassion for others.
I feel like this is quite a nice little segue for us to get into Sean Plunket. Maybe we could have a little bit of a chat about that right now. Now, we've already in today's show done a bit of a deep dive into what went on this morning. But if you're open to it, I wouldn't mind playing 60 seconds of the conversation that you had with Sean Plunket this morning. I look at you already putting your head in your hands. I know. Yeah. You know what I like about talking to people like this, Suze, is I don't know how you feel about it, but I ask a question and then you get a moment to answer that question. And then you look back to me and you leave a gap and I ask a question and then you get a moment to answer that question. I don't know whether journalist Sean Plunket has actually understood how that kind of conversation goes. I know that you're probably going to cringe to this and it's probably not your most comfortable situation for the day, but I do want to play a little bit of the conversation that you had on the platform this morning. You can give us the background about it shortly, but for people who haven't seen this, I just want to demonstrate the ludicrous nature of someone inviting you on their, for want of a better word, platform, and then shouting at you for the whole time and challenging everything about you. So yeah, if you want to turn off the sound now, you can, that's fine, but I'll just play it for other people so they can have a look. So this is you with Sean Plunket this morning.
Can I ask you then, who asked you to write this piece that I think started in the conversation on Luxons Dilemma?
Nobody asked me.
How did you get it published?
Because I pitched it to the publication, to the conversation, which I write for fairly frequently, because part of my role as an academic is to be engaged in public commentary.
Okay, a management academic, right? Not a political academic or a media academic?
Well, I'm a leadership scholar.
Questioning your authority immediately.
In both organisational context and a political context, and I've been doing that for some time.
How long some time?
Questioning your experience.
Well, I completed my PhD in 2013, so I started my study for that in 2008. And before that, I actually been involved in leadership roles for about 20 years.
What sort of leadership roles?
Questioning your qualifications.
So I was a Deputy Commissioner at the State Services Commission. I was General Manager of Human Resources at New Zealand Post.
Don't panic. We're nearly finished, Suze. I'll have this off in a second.
I was Senior Manager at Ministry of Education and also Mass. I was President of the New Zealand University Students Association, President of the University of Canterbury Students Association, held a senior role in a trade union. So those kinds of things.
Okay, ever been a member of a political party?
Oh, looking for the bias.
Never.
From someone who was the Director of Communications for a political party.
Student politician, never been a member of a political party.
Also worked in management for more time than I ever worked for a trade union. So don't make assumptions on the basis of the
You've written your piece largely.
There you go. Basically, I mean, then he goes on to waffle about your piece for a good while. And like I said, I think that it's perfectly valid to ask a question about the dilemma. Are you okay? Do you need a bit of a lie down before we get going?
Your analysis was actually quite therapeutic for me, Pat.
Listen, there's
when you've been gaslit in that fashion, that's kind of intimidating.
Look, okay, so here's the biggest thing, right? And this is for all of us who do a version of this, right? For a commentator to come on and question your credentials, what he's saying is you shouldn't be commenting on this because your credentials don't allow you to. Whereas his whole job, my whole job, is commenting on things that we don't have the credentials for. That's our complete job description. Sean Plunket spends his whole time commenting on things that he has no experience in doing work for. He's a journalist. He's a good journalist. He has good experience in this world. I will notice that where he got his profile, and we might say fame and fortune, but his profile was getting paid by those of us who pay taxes, working for Fairgo and RNZ. That's where he got his profile. So rallying against things like taking public money, it's where Mr. Plunket got all his profile by taking public money to be able to do something to start up a right-wing think piece like he's doing with the platform. But the point being, this is one of the main things I wanted to say to you. He's questioning your authority when you clearly have it from a place where he has none. And as I say, most of us people who commentate on things have no authority other than maybe a bit of experience because we've been around for a while and reading and hearing other people in those fields. So I don't know. I'm happy I'd like to hear your thoughts. Oh, the other thing I was going to say, if any of those accusations were, say, valid, like you have a bias or you're not experienced enough in management or any of those things he was saying, that doesn't either give more or less weight to the argument you're putting forward. I mean, I've never played All Black rugby. That doesn't mean that my position on what's happening this weekend in the game is going to be invalid. I might be spot on. It doesn't add to any of the credibility of it as well. So this whataboutism he was doing, trying to find holes and reasons why you weren't valid for this argument, was just the worst kind of broadcasting, just so you know. But what was your experience, Suze? Tell us all about it.
Well, so the background actually was that his producer rang me about 10 to 8, and I was rushing to get ready for a meeting. And I said, "No, I'm sorry, I don't have time to be interviewed. I've just got a really busy day. I need to get to my meeting." And so they accepted that. And then the phone rang about 10 minutes later. "Hello, it's Sean Plunket here." And he started asking me questions, and I was like, "Are we on air?" And he's like, "Yes." And I said, "Well, but you're already asking me questions and you haven't even told me that we're on air and you haven't asked for my consent. How is that okay?"
Well, just a pause for that's interesting because I only saw the clip.
No, so they've
that wasn't in the clip. So people aren't aware that you were basically, door stopped, knocked on your door and said, "Can you answer these questions, please?"
Yes. After having explained, actually, I'm really busy, I don't have time.
Yeah.
And then he catches me unaware. And yes, so they have cut that. They've cut that. So he said, "Right, well, I only want." What then happened is, "Well, I only want 3 minutes. Can you do that?" And so I said, "Okay." He said, "Do I have your consent then?" I was like, "Okay." And so that's the point at which the recording now shows. But my mind was a million miles elsewhere with something else I'm trying to deal with today. So I didn't feel prepared. And then he kind of went straight into questioning my credibility. And so I was kind of really taken aback by that, because why would as you say, why would he want to talk to me if he
exactly
thinks I'm incompetent, other than that he just likes to create this kind of psychodrama in which he is the one with a political, and I'm not saying none of us, I'm not saying that we don't have political biases, all of us, but he has a political bias and he wants to speak up the right and talk down the left. And so the reason he wanted to get you on was to try and embarrass you and make it look like you didn't know what you were talking about. So he was trying to take your credibility away. And then he was looking for every reason why. I didn't think I heard him in that conversation very much actually dispute what you were saying very much. I mean, he did. He was like, "That's not a dilemma, it's just a decision." But then he played whataboutism and he talked about Nanaima Huta and my first thought when he brought up Jacinda Ardern and the marijuana reform, I'm like, but you weren't writing about that. But it wasn't something, you weren't writing about Nanaima Huta. We've talked about Nanaima Huta and the awkward thing she faces about voting against the abortion becoming legal as well. We've talked about that, but that's not what your article was about. Your article was about Christopher Luxon and his dilemma for being pro-life around Roe versus Wade. Yeah, there's one comment in it, because I've got this thing in the article trying to explain to people this kind of spectrum, if you like, between kind of values-based versus more kind of expedient pragmatist styles. And so, I give an example of that Ardern has shown that she is prepared to be values-based and not politically expedient with her, adherence to the things like the vaccine mandates and the upholding of MIQ, even though it cost her a lot of political support.
Definitely. Maybe the next election. It might actually cost her the next election.
Yeah. And then contrasting that with, he's displaying a more expedient. But, I don't see that my article as being a hit job on Luxon. I think I'm trying to raise questions that I think are important and concerning about whether or not his attempt to appease the population and say there is no issue is a credible claim, and I think there are questions that remain.
Yeah.
So quite why, given the platform claims to kind of be about free speech and all that kind of stuff, why he felt compelled to be quite so hostile. I don't know. I mean,
this is one of,
he's getting lots of likes for it. So.
But this is one of the right wing's tropes. It's the same as Fox News, fair and balanced. The platform claims to be free speech, yet they ban people for swearing. The platform claims to be free speech because they're not taking any public money. The platform is not a successful business. It's a business that, and that's not a criticism, it's not a business that's supporting itself, though. It's had to get investment from two private individuals. And so the platform thinks that taking money from a pool which is public and using it for a media entity is bad, but taking money from a pool that is private and using it for a media entity is good. Neither of those two media entities are financially viable. They both require outside investment, one public money, one private money to do it. And also, I would say, again, just to that point, if you're taking public money, you typically have quite a lot of hoops to jump through and quite a lot of boxes to tick to do it. Taking private money, you can do and say anything. I wouldn't be surprised, and I don't know this, so it's conjecture, just from the no swearing thing, if his investors are quite conservative, potentially religious people. And I'd like to know that, because I want to know, does that influence the abortion conversation that's happening on the platform right now? So right. It's not a bastion. I don't know that. But money coming from people that don't want to have swearing on the radio, on the thing, means there's strings attached. What other strings are attached to this so-called free speech, using air quotes, conversation that obviously is not?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, he's trying to fill a gap in the right-wing talk zone that currently is not being really filled in New Zealand, of that sensationalist, I'm not saying Sean Plunket is QAnon, but attracting that kind of person, an anti-vaxxer type person, and not that he's anti-vaxxer, and questioning all authority, which is, since the vaccines have come in, have been a growing part of population. That's the audience he's going for.
Right. Yeah.
So if he can take down, let's be honest, a female who was a smart academic, who has got a very valid point about, his fearless leader, or one of his fearless leaders on the right, then why wouldn't he try and bring her on and embarrass her and shout at her and not let her answer and then hang up on her? He did actually basically hang up on you at the end, did not give you a chance to respond when he said, blah, 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 and then I can't even remember what he said at the very end, but we played it earlier. So, look, I just think that this is a warning to everyone about the platform. And I think this is also, not to say yay us, but this is why I have a list of academics and stuff who love coming on here, because we talk for 15, 20 minutes and I know when to shut up.
Yeah. I mean, I've told the producer I will not accept any further, requests. And if they ring, I will actually hang up, which, like, for me to hang up on someone would be so rude, but, it's just like, actually, this is what I have to do. I can't, it's not good to be subjected to that kind of bullying treatment.
Yep. And like I said, I mean, I did use the word female there on purpose, the air of misogyny around it. Would he be screaming over a male? Maybe he would be. Maybe he's just a prick overall. Look, I mean, I did a podcast with Sean Plunket in the last couple of months, and some of the things he was prepared to admit to I found fascinating. He was prepared to admit that Basically, he uses the word woke so much, and woke is the modern version of PC. It's what people use. And I broke down with him, what does that mean? And he basically admitted, he literally admitted to what woke to him means is anything that I don't agree with. That's what he considers woke. So he talks about all these woke left-wing media personalities. What he's saying is people who have a different ideology from him, they're all woke, and he's not. Because I got him to ask who wasn't woke, and he basically listed himself and Michael Laws. And that was about it. I mean, there might have been one or two others, I can't remember. But there was very few people in New Zealand that he could identify that weren't woke. And that's because he's in a minority position on a minority platform, quote unquote platform, and he's looking for a minority audience. Simple as that. Look, I mean, that's been a conversation about an uncomfortable conversation you had this morning. Do you want to finish with any particular statement? You're welcome to. I might cut you off, but I probably won't. But you're welcome to wrap up on anything that you want.
Well, actually, thank you for the bit of free therapy to help me recover. I mean, I just think, overall, I think if going back to the article about Mr. Luxon, I mean, I get that he is sincerely trying to reassure people, but the issue is far more complex than he is giving credence to. The ground could shift, and he has shown that he is willing to shift ground according to what's expedient, and I think that's important that we understand that. And with regards to Mr. Plunket, anything published in the conversation has to be evidence-based, and it has to show balance. And the editorial team are very strict about that. So it's not the kind of they're not the kind of normal op-ed pieces that are unashamedly partisan.
Yeah.
So the fact that he can take what given conversation's brand is about is an evidence-based and balanced piece of analysis, and be so offended by it and treat it as if somehow I was adopting some kind of extremist, left-wing view. I mean, I just think it's a real shame that we have that kind of environment. It's really not good for our democracy. It's really not good for social cohesion. It's really not good for, our capacity to just engage in a respectful manner with people who have different views. I mean, I've worked in different organisations, had different roles, dealt with people from, all sorts of political persuasions all my life, and don't generally have problem getting along with people. But yeah, I mean, he just, I guess I just represented something for him that he finds intolerable, at the same time that he's trying to say that we need to be more tolerant, and there's a real dilemma for him in that.
But that's why it's nonsense. I mean, like, he's basically said in that conversation with you, but didn't you hear Mr. Luxon unequivocally say he wasn't going to do X, Y, Z? And as you say, you said in the article, yes, I acknowledge that. And what Sean Plunket is saying is, well, so you should believe Luxon. But what will happen is if Jacinda says something unequivocal before the election, he won't believe that. Yes. So he's just being hypocritical because it's not his narrative to believe Jacinda saying something, this will not change. But he's saying, but Mr. Luxon said it, so you should leave it alone. And that's basically the ugliness of this world of political commentary. And, I'm sorry for the experience you had this morning. You're welcome to come back on any time with us and have another therapy session. But look, and I was going to say, the reason that I don't see this as a left-wing hit piece is I heard a conversation with James Shaw the other day where they were talking about those people that were going around central Auckland popping SUV tyres. As a protest. Oh, there was a group of protesters against climate change, and they were popping big SUVs, car tyres, and James Shaw faced a dilemma because the interviewer was saying, are you against what those people were doing? And he couldn't and wouldn't say, yes, I'm against what they're doing. James Shaw faced a dilemma in that situation where he couldn't lose that green vote for that sector of extremism versus distancing himself from something unless it is actually what he believed. So I think all political parties could face dilemmas, and this is one that Mr. Luxon faces around abortion.
Yeah, and my article acknowledges, no one's going to be perfect.
Yeah.
So,
Hey, Suze, it's been far longer than it should have been for us to talk to. I do appreciate you giving us more than 3 minutes today. And look, I really appreciate your time, and I enjoyed your article. And like I said to you, last night we were making a joke about Mr. Luxon's obviously pro-murder, because if he believes that abortion's murder, but he's going to do nothing about it, that means he's accepting that it's okay to murder whatever the correct term is for life inside the womb. Therefore, you make it in a much more succinct, intelligent, and academic way. But that was the conversation we had last night, and I don't think it's incorrect to look at this issue for Mr. Luxon as a dilemma. So thank you for your time.
Thanks so much for your time, Pat. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Woohoo, Chewy. So, mate, I was there doing the conversation. Can I just say I'm very proud of you all for sticking around. Numbers have basically stayed the same the whole time. I'm very proud of you all. Well done for sticking through. Hopefully you got something out of it. Chewy, what about your response, mate? Because I spoke to Suze for 45 minutes.
Oh, look, I thought that was brilliant, and just how nice it is to hear someone go, you know what, you were almost a palate cleanser for her other media experience that day, which I think is that's your community service badge for today.
Man.
So well done there.
This is the thing, though, right? People, and I want to put a comment up. It's come through from Facebook. People don't know who we are. They don't know what we're doing, and they've heard this conversation around Sean Plunket, or they've picked this up on a Facebook page, and they've started to think, oh, look at these raving lefties. So this is from Facebook. When you comment on Facebook, we don't get your details, so I don't know who this is from, but it says, this hasn't happened. It's just conjecture. We get it. You're obsessed with Labour, and why don't you call out the missing houses your boy Cindy promised us? I'm not even national. I just hate you religious people. Person goes on to say... we get it. You hate national. There's promises that have actually been broken by the actual government. Yeah. Why not question those instead of, So this is what I responded to that person. They didn't get it because I'm not on Facebook. We're using a streaming. This is what I responded. This was a nice tone. Hi there. I didn't quite say that, but you're obviously a first timer. We have spent tons of time criticising Labour when warranted. We have also praised Luxon and National when warranted. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. If you can't see this is an appropriate time to ask questions of Luxon and National, then humbly I would say it's you that doesn't have the ability to play each ball on its merit. Because, Chewy, you've been doing this. Actually, you're my OG, and we tested this together back in day one, and you've come on board to be a regular in the evenings as well. As much as anyone who's a regular, and I'm looking at some of those names here who are regulars, if it's warranting criticism by any political party, I've probably been harder on Labour, especially around some of their decisions. Go and tune into the conversation we had last night with Anna Brooks and see how much Labour gets the raw end of the deal in that conversation. But what I've experienced, Chewy, is when working in broadcasting, and I did talkback for a long time, is that when someone listening here's what they disagree with, you become the opposite. So
absolutely.
I was doing talkback when the Labour government was led by Helen Clark. So on one night of talkback, I'd be called a mouthpiece of Helen Clark. And the next night on talkback, I'd be called a right-wing fascist or a right-wing, whatever. So when people, it's actually not us that have a problem walking and chewing gum at the same time. It's zealots who are either completely anti this government, that they can't see the good things that they've done. And trust me, I've got dozens of those conversations from the last 3 or 4 years, especially around COVID stuff. It's actually more you that needs to go, so I've invited you to send me your critiques while we've been doing this. Tell me my holes in the argument. Not one has come through. Not one critique has come through.
And we don't want a community to form around what we're doing, like the platform has, which is just going to be an echo chamber. It's so toxic to other points of view.
Yep.
Why would you Suze isn't going to go back on that program? No. So there's another voice on.
Other academics won't either, based on Suze's experience. Because actually, I've been contacted today because Suze is a well-respected member of the academic community. I've noticed today that some of those friends of our shows who are academics. You look at the list, we've got dozens of them that come on regularly. We're all liking the messages that I was sending about what was happening tonight. This is going to harm the platform for those people coming on as well. I can't say absolutely, but it's pretty clear that it's pretty self-destructive, like you say, echo chamber. So you'll get Don Brash will go on. He'll go on happily, and he'll probably get a nice warm Plunket nose up his arsehole. National Party will probably go. National Party's blocked me from their Facebook page, so I don't know what that says about them and wanting to talk to us. Put it this way. Okay, here's an example. National Party's blocked me on their Facebook page. I got an email at the start of last year from Jacinda's office looking for her to come on the podcast saying she would not be available to you this year. I get rejected by them all. So there's no favoritism from them coming this way. Trust me.
But yeah, we're not going to be like, if we were an echo chamber, if it was just a whole bunch of people in the chat agreeing with each other, and we do agree on a lot, it's not interesting. It's not fun. It's not engaging. If you want to come on and have an alternative point of view, as long as you're respectful and you bring facts with you, you'll be welcome.
Oh, yeah. Oh, look at this. I'm going to add this and hope Suze doesn't mind we add this in. But look, Suze is watching. Ngā mihi te Pat and others here. I so appreciate your kind words. They're genuinely therapeutic. As I did feel bullied by Sean Plunket's play the woman, not the ball tactic, the woe man, not the ball tactic. Yeah, look, he was being a bully. And I loved when Suze said in that interview, being gaslit. It's completely correct. Sean Plunket was gaslighting Suze because it was obvious. There's two possibilities. Either Sean Plunket is too dumb to understand what she was writing about, and I don't think that's the case. The other obvious one is gaslighting going on. Yeah. The other thing is he was kind of talking to her like he hadn't read the article. You know how sometimes people see a headline or they get told by someone else what was in an article?
Yeah.
And that was enough to do the full thing. He was kind of talking like he hadn't read the article. I'm sure he had. So I'm sure it does come back to gaslighting. It's possibly the best one, best explanation. Hey, some more comments that came in. Me again said, typical Sean Plunket, don't attack the messenger. Paul says he was all chaff and redirect. And let me just say this one as well. No, we haven't had anyone tell us where the holes in our argument are yet, but someone has just said, I heard the whole interview and Suze was clearly rattled, and he did have every right to check her credentials. I'm going to come back to that because she was the one that wrote the piece. You mentioned strings attached. I believe the platform doesn't benefit from the public Information Journalist Fund. Is that what it stands for? I'm wondering, does your outfit benefit from the government's largesse? Well, listen,
Wow.
Julian, what a cool name, Snellgrove. It sounds like someone out of Harry Potter. The Snellgroves.
That's very funny.
Let me hang on. Let me just say,
you go.
First of all, Julian, you obviously missed the conversation when we were explaining the strings attached to the platform. They have investors that we already know don't allow various language on, and if you use that language, you get banned from the platform, i.e. no free speech. And we're now questioning, because they're obviously conservative type people who are the business mummy and daddy, the money, because they are obviously conservative in their views. I think it would be fair to assume, Chewy, that if you're a bit of not a fan of swearing, if you think that mustn't go on, there's a fairly conservative 1950s kind of a worldview. We're wondering what their views are around abortion, because we're just wondering if there are any more strings attached in. But let me say this. Every right to check her credentials, that point, Julian, is utter horse shit. And I'll tell you why. He wasn't checking her credentials. He was trying to belittle her position to make her argument less common. I'll tell you why. When I'm booking an interview, do you know where I check their credentials? On their academic page, right? And I'll tell you, I'm looking at Dr. Suze Wilson's academic page right now. This is what her page says. I'm not going to bring it up because I don't need to. I'll read it out verbatim though. She's in the School of Management. Okay, so we know where she's from. She's got a PhD. She's a doctor, right? Know where she's from. All things to do with leadership interest me, it says, along with an abiding interest in how we make organisations both effective for external stakeholders and enjoyable places to work for employees. My doctoral research examined why and how it has become normalised in recent decades to equate leadership with grandiose expectations or of transformation, vision and charisma. I argue these ideas, when examined closely, actually create undesirable pressures on leaders, grant them excessive powers, and rely on the problematic assumptions that followers are inherently inadequate. I am interested in theorizing and practicing leadership in ways that are more inclusive and humble. And her piece was about leadership. And then there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 bullet points with her job descriptions of what she's done since 1982. So he wasn't checking. He wasn't checking her credentials. He was trying to minimize her and paint the picture that she wasn't qualified to write the piece. That's what he was doing.
Every single point that he made about what her past experience was here's another reason why my audience should not listen to this person's opinion.
Yeah.
Everything was loaded.
Yeah.
And it's just so deceitful. And that guy goes, oh, she was clearly rattled. Maybe because she got called out of the blue.
She was rattled. There's no question.
And had said, I'm going to a meeting.
Yeah.
So
she was
just
rattled.
Utter bullshit from a veteran broadcaster who absolutely fucking knows better.
Now, as to the last point about, I wonder if we're benefiting from the government.
Dollar bills.
Well, I'll tell you that we're not. But I would happily take some. Wouldn't bother me in the slightest. It wouldn't control what I do or say. And I think this is the point that the Sean Plunkets of the world have sold this lie to people that if you get money from the government, can't talk about things. It's not the case.
Good luck.
I'm making it very clear, government, if you're watching, I'm sure they are. They're probably tracking me through my phone. I'll take your money to make this product. I'll take your money to talk this shit. Every night, if you give us some of that public fund money, happy to. Anyway, and also, so speaking of that, if you're a conservative multimillionaire and you want to throw some cash at us, we have a better designed studio than the platform does. So we don't need your money for equipment, right? So we're not going to scam you for that. We've already got it. You can just help us pay some salaries. Or maybe we should start up a Patreon. Maybe tonight would have been a good day for a Patreon. Anyway. Super chat's still open though. Hey, I enjoyed today, Chewy. It's one of these ridiculous. Oh my God, have we just gone into Saturday? Oh my God.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's a new record. We're into hour 2 of our 1 hour podcast.
Well, it's not a new record for the podcast though, because we had that right.
It's a record for
thing.
me.
Yeah. Well, I've never gone live through till Saturday. It's now Saturday though, and that's why I'm just so proud of you all. Look, the numbers have just gone up. They're going up. The people who are watching right now. Maybe we should make a deal, Chewy, that we won't leave until the numbers half what they are right now.
Last one out.
We can. Yeah. I was watching Mr. Beast this afternoon. He did one of those last one to leave the car wins. Maybe we could do something like that. Before we do though, what's happening? I made a mistake there, but we didn't go anywhere. Let's just got to do one thing before we go because I haven't done this yet today. Here we go. Got to put Nala on the shot.
Doggo.
She hasn't left. Oh my God, you woke her up. She hasn't left the room yet, which means it's not time for me to go quite to bed yet. But she will be going to bed soon. So, and I will be too. Now, look, you can follow us on Facebook. We're at Big Hairy News on Facebook. I'm going to say it again. I almost feel like you're hiding now, Sean Plunket fans, because what I want you to do is not. I don't care if you come at us personally. Like, honestly, it's water off a duck's back. But what I challenge you to do is find a hole in my argument. Like, honestly, Sean Plunket fans, was it appropriate that Sean Plunket door-stopped her? Was it appropriate that he phoned her live on air and put her straight on air? Honestly, was that appropriate? Now, the way you're honest with it is you think about it from the opposite side. You think about some raving lefty, I don't know, like Chewy, phoned up your academic icon and just threw them on air and started throwing questions at them and berating. Would that be okay? Because that's what's called fair and balanced. Like us, we're Fox News. That's what's called fair and balanced, is put a different spin on the same example. And if you still think it's okay, no, we're all entitled to our opinion. But what we find most of the time is people say, this is not appropriate when this happens, but it's okay when it's the opposite. Just be honest. Be honest with yourself about that.
We've got a contrast. You did an interview with an absolutely vile human being a couple of weeks back, and you showed him more respect than Sean Plunket showed Suze.
Yeah. Yeah.
And still pointed out massive holes in his worldview.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Why be needlessly aggressive and antagonistic unless you're talking to your weird, cretinous little internet fanboys.
Like, speaking of internet fanboys, hi Carl. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, Carl. I appreciate Carl, because Carl is one of our regulars who's been with us since the very early days, and thank you for the super chat, Carl. We appreciate that. And he's saying we should definitely get a Patreon. What we're doing is we're kind of doing things in fortnightly. So 4 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, we set up the audio podcast. This week I've set up the Facebook, and to be honest, maybe in a week or so's time I might set up a Patreon and see them. Oh, look at you all, lovely people. Kim as well. Happy Saturday. Oh, nice to have you all with us. And thank you for your super chat. We appreciate it. So the other thing is, if you can't hear in our conversation how sort of balanced we are, I mean, I said in it that the decisions that Jacinda's made of the last 6 months might cause her the election. Like, we're realists. It's like we're not going that National's going to lose and go the left and they're always going to win. We're absolutely realists. We're not going to say it. And I've said it all the time. What the National's doing at the moment is completely fair. All they're doing is saying Labor's bad, Labor's bad, Labor's bad, because they're an opposition party. It's what the opposition parties do. So actually, if you want free speech and you actually want a for real conversation where people, where entities, where political parties, where ideas are lauded when they deserve to be and criticised when they warrant to be, no matter where they come on the spectrum, baby.
Yep.
Baby.
I love playing devil's advocate. I like black hatting my own team.
Yeah.
I'm a lefty who wants the left
OnlyFans.
to be better. And yes, Patreon or OnlyFans. We've
OnlyFans.
Yeah.
Sheesh, bro. Well, if we do an OnlyFans, you can have it for the first 6 months, and then I have it for the second 6 months. Deal?
Yeah, that sounds fair.
All right. I think we're done, guys.
It's not nice time.
Remember I can never go to sleep after these. I'm going to be up for another hour and a half. I just can't. I come off these things pretty wide all the time. Remember, we've got an audio podcast that goes on. The audio podcast is basically this, with the audio ripped off. This is for the audio podcast. Oh, there we go. That was just sitting in the back there. And if you miss a show or you want to share it, that's the other thing. Our little hashtag is hashtag share our shit. Because the way you can help us if you've enjoyed what you've seen and you want to get on board is to share what we're doing. Tell other people about what we do. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, search for hashtag BHN or Big Hairy News and become a subscriber there. Obviously, our YouTube channel, which you're probably watching on, become a subscriber there. Follow me on Twitter. Actually, I think I've got one that's got both of us, isn't it? There you go. Look, there we are on Twitter, Ghost Inferno or Pat Brittenden. And if you follow either of us, but if you follow me, I'm better than Chewy. If you follow me, I put all the clips on there, and I always tag Chewy in them when the ones he's on as well. So if you've only got time to follow one of us now, I mean, like, you might have to follow one of us, then cut off, then, no, you should follow Chewy. Chewy's much better than me. Chewy's actually a comedian. I'm just a bullshitter with a microphone. And the way you can help us and the way you can get involved with what we do is to tell people about us, spread the word, spread the love, and I guess we're done. Anything you want to add in the Chewy at the end there, mate?
Nah, I'm all good, mate.
Yeah.
Oh,
it was fun.
Actually, no, one thing for those.
Are you going to hang up on me now? Are you going to go one thing and then hang up?
No, I did that once and it was very, very funny. For those of you in Dunedin, there is a solidarity march tomorrow from the Exchange at 11 a.m. To counter some very nasty elements that are also coming to our town tomorrow.
Yep.
So if you would like to stand with people, that is an excellent way to do it. Details are on Facebook. I
think I'll try and get along to that. We'll see what actually happens. So, we didn't talk about Star Wars. Someone just said Star Wars. I have a small problem with Rogue One. Watched it tonight. Actually, technically watched it last night because we're now on Saturday. And that's that, how Rogue One is the week before episode 4.
Yeah.
Well, the first shot of that is when the main protagonist, the female, is a kid, right? Which means it's 15 years or so before that.
Yeah.
In the very first scene where the guy comes to find her father, the scientist, and those soldiers that were with him in the black,
Death Troopers.
They look far more advanced than the stormtroopers that come after them. I thought that they should have made those be, like if you've got a 1995 car, a 2010 car is a lot slicker looking car. That's about my only hole though, Chewy. So it's
small. They were a small elite unit and they all died. So there we go. Plugged.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining us today. Really do appreciate it. Thank you, Suze, if you're still watching, Suze Wilson, for being involved. Look, I mean, I've already had messages from Sean Plunket, him saying, I look forward to cutting it up on Monday and using it in my show. And I just responded to him, well, look, I'm always happy to help out an aging broadcast to get 5 minutes of content on their show. So feel free. I'll even send you the link if you really want to. But I'm sure, as I think we've demonstrated clearly, Sean will spin a narrative on this and he'll make it sound like what he wants to sound like. And then, actually, you know what? He'll either do that and then his listeners will go, well, we told you, or he won't touch it. Because actually, if you watch this whole thing, as we've proved with no one responding, there ain't too many holes. Yep. We are being fair with our fucking free speech. Is that right?
Diddle.
Bumhole.
Bumhole.
Dirty bumhole. All right, guys. Thank you for your time. Thanks for joining us. We've got the weekend off. We'll be back Monday from 10 p.m. for another edition of Big Hairy News. Chewy, love you to bits. We might see you in about 11 hours. We'll see how that goes with waking up in time. Other than that, we'll catch you next week, and we'll catch all of you on Monday. # share our shit. See you, team. Bye-bye.
Cheers, family.